Hello and welcome to Renegade Files, your serious yet fun podcast for paranormal adventures, unsolved mysteries, and deep cultural analysis. I'm your host, Lex Gordon, broadcasting from the Jungle Villa Outpost, deep in the uncharted tropics. This is Renegade Files episode 136, The Real X-Files. Paranormal documents from the CIA and FBI. The Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, was enacted into law on July 5th, 1967, to promote transparency and ensure public access to government records. It allows individuals to request access to records from any federal agency, fostering an informed citizenry essential for a free society. Much of what has been requested and released is of a mundane nature, such as historical records, documents to support legal cases, and general information on government studies, uses of funds, or other bureaucratic records. This amounts to literal millions of documents. But among these typical government records, we can also find a surprising number of officially declassified reports on a long list of strange, paranormal, and mysterious subjects. Today on Renegade Files, we will sneak into the locked offices with our flashlights and rifle through the unlocked FOIA cabinets to uncover some of the most unlikely and mind-blowing cases ever discovered in the previously hidden, top-secret documents of the most secretive intelligence agencies in the United States. Among these declassified reports, we'll find revelations such as a UFO crash recovery, Bigfoot hair samples, pyramids on Mars, psychic spies, and teleportation studies. So join me now on this unscripted adventure, and together we'll explore the clandestine world of the real X-Files, paranormal documents from the CIA and FBI.
The real X-Files, paranormal documents from the CIA and FBI.
Okay, thank you so much for tuning in. This is going to be fun. As we start out, I want to give a shout out to researcher John Greenwald and his website, theblackvault.com, plus the Black Vault Radio podcast. I've mentioned his work before and cited his archive as a resource in previous episodes. And while most of the research in this episode is my own and based on original source materials, no conversation about FOIA requests and the freedom of information and free speech in the current landscape is complete without a nod to the work John has done. So, if you haven't, be sure to check out his website, where he has organized and collected millions of pages of declassified documents, and much of them with in-depth analysis. Also, if you enjoy what I make for you here, you can find all things Renegade Files at therenegadefiles.com, your one-stop shop for cool Renegade Files gear, bonus episodes, the RFA agency on Patreon, and more. Just visit therenegadefiles.com. Okay, let's get into this one. This episode is unscripted, so we're going to go through what I have for you in that way, but I do have everything organized, so this should be fairly smooth. When I started looking into this subject for today, I was shocked at just how much there is as far as paranormal or high strangeness documents in what I'm calling the real X-Files. I mentioned in the intro what FOIA is and a bit of the history there, and I'm sure you probably know some of it, but it seems like things have really ramped up recently because of, I don't know, maybe because the disclosure topics are in the news. the Epstein files, a general distrust of mainstream news sources and big government as a whole. So what I did was leverage some of the resources available to all of us, like the CIA reading room, the FOIA website, and FBI.gov, their document archives. And I conducted a few days worth of recon in those backwaters. And by looking through keywords and known document titles, I narrowed it down to a few hundred files. Then I read through all of those over a day or two and narrowed that list down to 7 of the coolest things I could find. There are arguably another 20 that are really cool. We could do another episode on this someday, but these were the top 7, at least for now. So I'll dive into each one of those for you here, and there's some crazy stuff. So be sure to cruise through to the very end for sure. I'm thinking we can cover it all in about an hour or so. So a normal episode. When you start to dive into the real X-Files at first, you might be shocked at the numbers of documents that are returned in your searches. And I mean on these specific government website search tools. Some are better than others. But for example, the biggest is probably UFOs. A search for UFOs on the CIA page gives you 560 documents as of the timing of this recording. And theirs is one of the smallest returns in the category. But when you start digging through them, what you realize is, and this is true for the CIA, the FBI, the DOJ, ATIP, RO, and everywhere else that FOIA documents land. But what you realize is that the government loves to document communications and interactions. So tons of what's there is often letters sent in by citizens. For example, if, for whatever reason, a person who sees a UFO in Texas is compelled to write a letter to the FBI asking if they know anything about it, the FBI will write back and say, no. And then those 2 letters become part of the FBI archive on UFOs. So you can see how that could accumulate. But it is by far all like that. And there are some super cool things buried deep. So strap in. Now I'm just going to dip around to this other page that I have where I have all of these bookmarked. And we're just going to go through them. I don't have them in any sort of official outline order. So really there is no order to worry about. These are all weird. They all fall into the broad category of high strangeness or paranormal. One thing that I did realize, and it's actually cool, is how transparent, at least on the surface, these agencies are. They kind of help you through it. The websites aren't the best, as you would imagine from a giant government website, but the information is there, and they do a pretty good job of helping you find it, at least what they've decided to make available. So the other side of this is when we talk about FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, they're kind of like when you ask off for a day at work. They are exactly that, a request. It isn't in stone that you're going to get what you ask for. And a lot of times it's a gigantic runaround for years where people bang on that door to try to get something. And it's interesting. And another thing that's kind of cool is there are some situations where people have obtained FOIA documents and that they come redacted. And then the persistent researcher will, keep at it basically. And eventually it has happened where we've been able to get the unredacted documents. And that's very interesting to me because either I don't understand how they physically redact those documents or they keep 2 copies. Maybe the latter is probably the case. They redact a copy and send it to you. They keep the original. So, I've always wondered that about, we're not going to get into it today, but about the documents concerning the JFK assassination, we know they've all been obliterated with black magic markers for decades at this point. So I've always sort of thought in the back of my mind that, okay, someday they're going to release the JFK documents, and when they do, they're just going to be black magic marker anyway. So, because I would have imagined that the redactions are like a permanent thing, but apparently not so much as I have thought in the past. But that's just a brief aside. It's just an interesting footnote that I've realized in the process of doing this kind of research over the years. So, getting right into it, we're just going to go left to right through my articles here. So, kind of backing up what I said before, I think that if you look at the CIA search tool, they returned 560 documents on UFOs. And when I say documents, some of them are a page, some of them are 100 pages. So it at least hits. At the same time, if you do a search for paranormal, there's 33. So with that specific word, some of those, and these aren't the heavy hitters that I pulled out, but like paranormal perception phenomena. This is a development investigation of paranormal perception phenomena that the CIA conducted in conjunction with, I think it was Stanford University. This is a very long technical sort of academic paper on a study of the phenomenon. So there's a lot of stuff like that too. Not necessarily is that document telling us something paranormal that we didn't know, but it's a study of the ideas. There's other things like there will be multiple entries sometimes in documents, and some of those documents are divided into several PDFs. So when you get a return like 33 instances of the keyword paranormal at the CIA website, when you really go through them, 20 of them are just one thing where see how that works? Right. So anyway, just interesting observations of the research process. So I'm going to dig into the first one, which is exactly that document that I mentioned. So this is a memorandum for the Director of Central Intelligence. So this is top-level CIA stuff. The subject is Office of Research and Development and Office of Technical Service, Paranormal Perception Research Project. And this is dated December 1973, and I believe it was released in 2002. And it's cool when you see these documents because they have secret stamped on them, and then that's crossed out when they distribute it. It's always fun looking at this kind of stuff. I'm not going to go through this entire document because it is extensive. I think it's at least 100 pages long. I don't know, man. There's crazy stuff here. But yeah, okay, here we go. Okay, so I guess apparently not as long as I thought. Maybe it's 40 pages. I'm just going to describe and give you like a brief sort of executive summary of what this study is. In the subject heading, we have, is it seven topics that are addressed. Number one, and this is directly from the report, it's recommended that a research and development investigation of paranormal perception phenomenon be initiated with Stanford Research Institute. A proposal for such an investigation is attached. This is a tightly directed advanced research project. Further recommended that the effort be jointly funded and monitored by the Office of Research and Development and the Office of Technical Service. These are all branches of the CIA. The project officer will be redacted. The estimated cost for the proposed effort is redacted. The objectives of the proposed effort are fourfold. Approximately 50% of the effort will be directed toward the investigation of the opportunities for the operational use of, quote, gifted individuals. 20% directed toward establishing those characteristics which will enable us to identify, quote, gifted subjects. 20% directed toward investigating the neurophysiological correlates of paranormal activities, and 10% directed toward validation of paranormal experiments. That's very interesting. That sort of ties up the idea of what they're trying to do. And you can see this is a very well thought out project. They're not just jumping to the idea to say, oh, let's get some guys from the university to see if anything paranormal is real. No, they've divided up the sort of division of labor of what they're going to inspect with this project. And half of it is going to be investigating opportunities for the operational use of gifted individuals. So what does that sound like to you? That sounds like the militarization of people who are psychic. I mean, in a nutshell, if I had to guess. Another 20% of their efforts establishing the characteristics to help us identify those gifted subjects. And then the remaining resources to do a few other things. It's cool, isn't it? So a previous project, it says here, this is part 3 of what they're going to do. Summarize the attached proposal. So this is where you get into like the bureaucracy of it, right? So they're like, here is the summarized proposal. Part 3 is a previous summarization of the proposal, and we're going to propose that we propose this proposal in the following proposal, right? That kind of sort of runaround. It's why government stuff costs so much, because they dance in circles, right? Often. So there's objectives, activities, locations, demonstrated reproducibility, all of the things that you would imagine in a scientific study they want to hit. There's a statement of work, and I'm not sure if that's in here. We're going to see what it is. I think that'll give us a cooler idea of what's going on. But the emphasis, they say, are those characteristics of most importance to intelligence, such as resolution, information transfer and accuracy, correlation of physiological responses to reliability and accuracy of paranormal perception, enhancement of those abilities which seem to be most useful to the intelligence community, and exploration of new avenues of research discovered during the course of the program. The proposed project is well suited to a joint effort by the Office of Research and Development and the Office of Technical Service, which this is the second time they've told us that. And I'm not going to bore us too much about this. I'm just going to skip through to the cool parts. A lot of this gets pretty blurry. So they're just laying out here what their overall plan is. It's highlighted as perceptual augmentation techniques. So this is part 1 of the technical proposal. This thing is signed Russell Targ and Harold Putoff. These are the senior research physicist and senior research engineer, respectively, and approved by Earl Jones, the director of Electronics and Bioengineering Laboratory with the CIA, and Bonner Cox, executive director of Information Science and Engineering Division. It's a very high-level government sort of spy activity. What this turns into is exploratory research in remote viewing, remote perception of graphic material. So that's the old, I'm holding up a card, what's on it? A star. Yes, good job. So that sort of thing. Then there's proposed for objective, technical, and reporting. It's basically the nuts and bolts of doing the study. And I'm going to skip to the statement of work. Let's see. That's only on page 41. And then at the end, there's some cool stuff I'm going to describe that's in here. It would be cool if you could jump to the page numbers, but particularly where this is documented, you can't. Anyway, let me scroll down. Just 1 second. Why would they put it at the end like this? I don't know. A lot of this stuff is kind of strange like that. It goes in weird orders. The other thing is some of it is not terribly accurate. Okay, here we go. Statement of work. By working with... So this is basically the proposal of what they're going to do. Number 1, by working with gifted subjects and generated target materials, we'll measure the accuracy of remote viewing as a function of variables such as length of viewing time, target distance, and target complexity. Based on the data accumulated, SRI, and that's the Stanford Research Institute, right, will attempt to define the characteristics of the information channel in terms of bitrate, resolution, and other parameters of interest. To determine the limits of the remote viewing ability, both pictorial and geographic target material will be used. Number 2, in order to discriminate against the possibility of an unknown experimenter subject leakage channel, for some experiments the client will provide geographical targets unknown to the experimenters to ensure that the subject uses only a remote viewing channel in his determination of the nature of the target. We talked about this some in maybe our previous episode, where we touched on some remote viewing stuff, where what would happen in some of these experiments is that the people doing it would learn based on the content what the experimenter was asking them for, and they would also draw upon just like a general knowledge, and that over time they would almost intuitively know where a location was when a researcher would ask them to look at an address given longitude and latitude, because they did it so much. So that they would know that a given latitude and longitude was like in the Pacific somewhere, so that they would go into their trance and describe beaches and palm trees. And then if another one happened to be in the desert in the Middle East, they would say, oh, I see, tan buildings and yellow sand and windblown rocks, right? I don't know. So this is an indication that it, as early as number 2 in their scope of work, they want to curtail that if possible. So number 3 is following a lead provided by work at another laboratory in which a subject could identify pictorial material even if the picture was only mentally projected onto a card. It's very interesting. This study will make use of pictorial targeted material with a decreasing density scale from clearly visible to invisible in order to measure the accuracy of perception as a function of target density. Cool, right? So that's talking about, the picture of the star on the index card, and they have a bunch of them, and they slowly fade out all the way to the point where there's nothing there. And then if nothing's there, is that a picture of a star? I don't know. It gets crazy. The EEG portion of the program directed toward determination of physiological correlates. So they've been measuring sort of biofeedback. And I'm not going to go through all these, but you get an idea of the thoroughness of what they propose to do. And the other thing that's interesting to me, and then I'm going to get down to some of the cool, there's like crazy drawings and stuff in here. But anyway, as I said, what's interesting is that they sort of take this approach like it's a done deal that this works. Doesn't it seem like it? It sounds like it. Like, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And it doesn't seem like this is their first rodeo. And this was 73. Was that right? Did I say 73? I'm pretty sure. I don't want to scroll all the way back up because it's hard to go through these docs. And I want to get to the things that I wanted to wrap this up with. But it's interesting, though, isn't it? That they sort of approach it as like, this is just another day at the office. Right? Oh, we're going to use this, and we're going to take this other study where these guys nailed it 100 times, and blah blah blah. It seems like this would just be like a common a situation, or like the results are like, yeah, we're going to make sure that it's this and that, and it just comes across as, it seems like they're approaching this remote viewing and paranormal sort of interaction as like a done deal. So anyway, in this same document, when you can go and find all these documents too. That's what FOIA does. So anyway, there's a whole section of an appendix of things that the remote viewers drew. So one of them is an incredibly good sketch of a girl behind a door in a shielded room. There's a bunch of weird ones. There's one that says the target, and it looks like a little stick of dynamite. These are like hand sketches. And then they sort of show what the person drew in response, and it doesn't seem like this guy got it right. The target was a bomb, and they drew like a giraffe and a drum set and a snake and a pen. Oh, they missed the bomb, apparently. This is called Firecracker and Geller's responses, target 1. Most immediate response that I saw a cylinder with noise coming out of it. So that also could be that he did see the bomb. There's varying degrees of success here. There's one which is, and I think some of these have the people's names and some don't, but their names are irrelevant. One is figure 12. The target is a bunch of hand-drawn grapes. And the response is a bunch of hand-drawn grapes that literally the two look almost indistinguishable. That's really amazing that they could hold up that card and say, what do you see? I mean, if that's deadly accurate and repeatable, then where are those people now, and what exactly are they doing, and what is the CIA doing now that we don't know about? Because when you see those drawings, it's shocking. Let's look at a few more. So one is the target is the devil, and this guy drew a pretty good looking, a little bit more dimensional than a stick figure, but with horns on his head, a forked tail, and a little trident he's holding. Pretty close to devil. The other responses are a cool, intricate, like matrix that says God in the middle, a sun, a thing that says the Ten Commandments, something that looks like a stairway to a flower. And I don't know if if those are like the opposite of the devil. Would be very interesting. These don't come with a lot of analysis. Let's see here. And let me see if there's any more cool ones. All right. So here's the target. The other target was the sun and the moon and the solar system. And then the return is fascinating. It's like a sun with a star in it, a little rocket going by, something that looks like Saturn with some rings on it, a bunch of stars, some comets. I mean, whoever did that nailed that one for sure. So there's a lot of interesting things. 3 targets were drawn during the course of this work. This is for the solar system one. In the first, the experimenters closed the outer door of the laboratory, shielded the room that was locating the target. The experimenters returned to the room. Let's see. It sort of reiterates what I described. So fascinating. So there's one where the target is a camel, and the response, the person sketched what he saw, which is a horse. So that's pretty close. I mean, they're facing in the same orientation, and just he missed the hump of the camel. And there's a few more examples there. A bird, and then definitely the person drew a bird. And it seems one of the people that they studied maybe was Uri Geller. He's the famous spoon guy. And it doesn't really say if he was a part of the experiment directly or not. So anyway, that's a fascinating document. That's the first one. That document is called, let me go right back to the top, Paranormal Perception Study. Something like that. What was it called again? It was called the Paranormal Perception Research Project. One of the super cool real X-Files from the CIA. And it seems to me pretty conclusive. It doesn't. There's not like an executive report summary at the end that tells us what their findings were. Probably somewhere in those files there are. Whether or not anyone has initiated a FOIA request to really put that on public display, I'm not sure. I didn't find it, but I also didn't dig super deep to it. So that's the first one. Really cool Paranormal Perception Research Project from the director of the CIA. 73. Bringing us to the next one. This is really cool. So this is also the CIA, and this is a report from 1952. It's publicly available. It's called Central Intelligence Agency, Information from Foreign Documents. I'm just going to go through this one. Once again, this is a PDF. It's a scan. It's 4 or 5 pages long. Report number 00-W-23602. Date of information 6 of August 1952. And it is the subject, military, scientific - air, the country, Belgian Congo. This was originally published in German. It's been translated into English. And it's crazy. So I'm just going to read you what this says. Flying saucers over Belgian Congo uranium mines. Directly from the document, I'm going to read. Recently, 2 fiery discs were sighted over the uranium mines located in the southern part of the Belgian Congo in the Elizabethville district east of the La Upula River, which connects the Meru and Banguelo lakes. The discs glided in elegant curves and changed their position many times, so that from below they sometimes appeared as plates, ovals, and simply lines. Suddenly, both discs hovered in one spot and then took off in a unique zigzag flight to the northeast. A penetrating hissing and buzzing sound was audible to the onlookers below. The whole performance lasted from 10 to 12 minutes. Commander Pierre of the small Elizabethville airfield immediately set out in pursuit with a fighter plane. On his first approach, he came within about 120 meters of one of the discs. According to his estimates, the saucer had a diameter of from 12 to 15 meters and was discus shaped. And I'll just pause right there and say 12 to 15 meters is about the same size as the Cape Girardeau UFOs that were apparently or supposedly allegedly crashed and recovered in New Mexico a few years after Roswell. And it's also the similar size to multiple other disc-shaped UFO reports. Moving back to the article here, the inner core remained absolutely still, and a knob coming out from the center and several small openings could be plainly seen. So what the pilot described was that this object seemed to rotate around its central axis, which he described as remaining absolutely still. So like super sturdy in the sky. The outer rim was completely veiled in fire and must have had an enormous speed of rotation. The color of the metal was similar to that of aluminum. The discs traveled in a precise and light manner, both vertically and horizontally. Changes in elevation from 800 to 1,000 meters could be accomplished in a few seconds. The discs often shot down to within 20 meters of the treetops. Pierre did not regard it possible that the disc could be manned, since the irregular speed as well as the heat would make it impossible for a person to stay inside the stable core. Commander Pierre had to give up pursuit after 15 minutes, since both discs, with a loud whistling sound which he heard despite the noise of his own plane, disappeared in a straight line toward Lake Tanganyika. He estimated their speed at about 1,500 kilometers per hour. And let me just take my American self to the kilometers to miles per hour converter. 932 miles an hour. So fast. This again, this says published the 29th of March, 1952. I'm not sure that that's what. Oh, okay. So the date that the document was distributed to the CIA was the 6th of August. And the original publication that they obtained was from the 29th of March from a German language Vienna communique about the Belgian Congo and a UFO sighted there and chased by an airfield commander in a fighter jet. What about that, right? That's cool. I mean, that's solid right there. This is the kind of thing that you wonder, how is this not front page UFO news? I mean, it's possible that other people know more about it than me. I'm certain of that. The other thing that's interesting in here is there's an appended sketch, and it is basically like a technical drawing of what this person saw, and it looks like a cross section cut from the edge. so that you can see the incredibly pointed nature of the ends of the saucer and what looks like antennas above and below, like at least there's some kind of pole with like a gyroscope sort of central whatever. I guess it's just a guess of his because I don't think you could see inside of it. There is some text that accompanies the sketch. It says, shows the construction principle of the flying saucers. Oh, it does say the captions are, in part, purely conjecture based on reports by pilots who pursued the discs. In part, they were learned from secret research institutions. The central core contains an explosive, the installation for radar steerage. It has a catapult knobs and antennae, as well as counter-pressure housing around the core. A rim rotates, which has jets on its upper and lower side, plus fuel chambers. The roller bearing is shown by the letter L. The launching occurs at a sharp angle in a manner of discus throw. The revolutions per minute of the rim probably amount to 22,000 revolutions per minute. So that's how fast they estimate that it was spinning. The jets on the bottom of the rim serve to propel the disc vertically upward. Lateral steerage results from a switching on and off of the various jet groups. Let's see. Then there's some repetition, and then that's kind of the end of it. But it's really, really neat. And it doesn't look exactly like some wonky UFO in the 50s. It looks pretty technical, whatever this illustration is describing, if that's what they saw. So that was one of my favorite ones. Once again, that document is Central Intelligence Agency, information from foreign documents or radio broadcasts, and it is titled Military Scientific Air, Belgian Congo. A report of a UFO, and a pretty good one. You know, I think any modern day UFO researcher would love to grab that as a bit of evidence because it's well done and it's legible and it's cool to read it. So that brings us to the next document. This is from the Air Force. This is really cool. This is number 3 in my Real X-Files episode that we're in the midst of. Welcome. I found this was really cool. This is pretty short and sweet. It's from the CIA.gov website. It's a FOIA request, but what's cool about this is not really what it is, but who it's from. So this was the 12th of August, and I think it's a minute back, as the kids say. 20th of July, 1966. So pretty far back. But memorandum for the record, subject, Air Force request to declassify CIA UFO report. The reference, name for chief, dated, and then approved for release on February of 2010. So this was a FOIA request. Someone sought it out. They got it in 2010, and it's a document from 1966. Number 1, Miss Sarah Hunt of Air Force Office of Information phoned on 10 August to determine the status of our response to their request. Upon instructions from Dr. Walter McKee, I told her that the declassified reports is being retyped and would be forwarded soon. Miss Hunt's restraint was admirable. She pressed gently for a more specific response, which was not forthcoming. And number 3, Miss Hunt concluded by saying that Mr. John Laird, a newsman, had an article on UFOs in the last week's Saturday Review. She stated that they wanted to show the new version to him as soon as it was declassified. And this is signed D.B. Stevenson. And that's about it. It's just a 1-page letter, and it describes this process. But what's interesting to me is that here we have a document, a memorandum for record, dated, stamped, and official as it gets, where we have the Air Force requesting the CIA to declassify a UFO report. There isn't much about the report. We don't have the actual declassification documents that they received. If they ever received any, we don't really know. But what's interesting to me is that this is a document where the Air Force is asking for a UFO report from the CIA. So that in and of itself is pretty cool. So the next one, that brings us to document number 4 in our X-Files, real X-Files documents. And this document is called, dun dun dun, Laboratory Examinations and Inquiries Concerning the Bigfoot Information. So this was from the FBI, located in part of the FOIA release documents in the FBI vault. And what I have here is a PDF document. And if you want to see all of these in a quick way, you can join the RFA agency on Patreon, and I'm going to have all of these documents there, pictures of the PDFs and those sketches that I talked about earlier, every bit of this, so you can just dip right through it. You can join up for free for a whole week. You can look at these and then you can bail if you really want to. Or if you're cool, you can hang around for a little bit and support the show. And for doing so, you get tons of bonus episodes and the Dark Intel files for every episode I make, and a lot of cool stuff and cool people in there that you can chat with. You can make comments on my posts and talk amongst yourselves and to me. And all the other cool things that Patreon gets you, and it helps me a lot, so I would love to see you in there. All right, so this document is from Mr. Peter Byrne, who is the director of the Bigfoot Information Center, and that would have been in Oregon. And he had sent in a sample of Bigfoot hair, I think, to Jay Cochran Jr., who was the assistant director of the FBI's science. Yes, that's right. Jay Cochran Jr., assistant director, FBI Scientific and Technical Services Division. So what happened here was a man named Peter Byrne, who was the director of the Bigfoot Information Center in Oregon, sent communications to the assistant director of the FBI at the time, Jay Cochran Jr. And this is this whole cache of documents starts out with this reply. It's the first chain that we have. It says that basically the assistant director of the FBI tells this man, Peter Byrne, "Thank you, I've received your letter on November 24th requesting an FBI laboratory analysis of 15 unidentified hairs and tissue, ostensibly from a Bigfoot. The FBI laboratory," he tells this person, "conducts examinations primarily of physical evidence for law enforcement agencies in connection with criminal investigations. Occasionally, on a case-by-case basis, in the interest of research and scientific inquiry, we make exceptions to this general policy. With this understanding, we will examine the hairs and tissues mentioned in your letter." So this is good news for Mr. Peter Byrne at the time, because basically he had sent them some Bigfoot hairs and asked them to check them out. It's cool because here we have, once again, a documented case where the FBI is responding to and taking part in a paranormal investigation. No other way to describe that. So there's some cool paranormal related notes on the side there of this document. This is of the first page of this. There's more I'll get into, but this is just the letter, and it has handwritten on here, laboratory examinations concerning the Bigfoot information, and it says the Dallas, Oregon. I guess that's the location, and in parentheses it says Sasquatch, which is cool. So it's signed by Jay Cochran and a bunch of scribbly government jibber jabber all over it. So then we have another letter, which is on the letterhead of the Bigfoot Information Center and Exhibition. Dear Mr. Cochran, thank you for your letter. That would have been September 10th, 1976. I'm writing again to ask if you could possibly arrange for a comparative analysis of some hairs that we have here, which we are unable to identify. You may know something of the program in which we, through the part sponsorship of the undermentioned academy, are engaged. Should you not, I am enclosing an article which will particularly explain what it is that we are trying to do. Briefly, we do not often come across hair which we are unable to identify, and the hair that we have now, about 15 hairs attached to a tiny piece of skin, is the first that we have obtained in 6 years, which we feel may be of importance, Please advise if you are able to perform this task for us. Yours very truly, Peter Byrne, Director, Bigfoot Information Center. Cool. And it's got, once again, all stamped up and scratched around. In this, he's attached some articles about Bigfoot recognition. He has a screen grab of the famous Patty from the Patterson-Gimlin film. We went over that if you go back to our Bigfoot episode or two that we've done, and you can listen to an analysis of that. And then the FBI writes him back and once again says kind of the same thing. Basically, he says, okay, we'll do it. And then they go on to this cache of document. This goes on to show a few other things and a few other articles that the FBI or that Mr. Byrne has included that made it into this file. And I'm just going to skip to the chase and find the final response here. It's at the bottom. I have to scroll down. Okay, so cutting to the chase. This is the final or one of the final letters in the exchange, and this letter is to Mr. Curtis, Executive Vice President, Academy of Applied Sciences in Boston, Massachusetts. Dear Mr. Curtis, and I guess he's someone who was involved in the analysis. The hairs which you recently delivered to the FBI laboratory on behalf of the Bigfoot Information Center and exhibition have been examined by transmitted and incident light microscopy. Those examinations include a study of morphological characteristics such as root structure, modularity structure, and cuticle thickness, in addition to scale casts. Also, the hairs were compared directly with hairs of known origin under a comparison microscope. It was concluded as a result of these examinations that the hairs are of deer family origin. The hair sample you submitted is being returned as enclosed in this letter. Sincerely yours, J. Cochran, Assistant Director, FBI. So, after much ado, the FBI determined and concluded and maintained that the hair that was sent to them by the Bigfoot Information Center was in fact a deer hair. Okay, so wah, wah, wah. Not the worst situation. That's why we do science, right? That's why we investigate. That's why we study. And I would go so far as to say that the people from the Bigfoot Information Center maybe they weren't thrilled, but if that's the answer from the FBI, they're glad to have the honest answer. I'm sure of it. It's cool that this document still resides in the FBI archives, and it's just a little piece of Bigfoot history, although sort of a debunked piece, but not the end of the world. It was sent in good faith. No one was trying to trick or hoax or deceive. It was genuine people who had discovered something, and they sent it in, and that was the answer. And so that's kind of cool. I don't know if it's fun. It's kind of a drag for those guys. But once again, it was a deer hair. All right. So this moves us on to the next document, which is referred to as the Guy Hottel Memo. And this is about a crash flying saucer in New Mexico, March 22nd, 1950. Now I want to see if I have it in more than one place here. All right. So this document, just because it's easy to read and they've done such a good job of like cataloging it, this does come from the fine folks at the Black Vault. So I originally did find it at the CIA website through the FOIA request. But so the reason that I'm reading this from the Black Vault iteration is that the guys at the Black Vault had requested this document and they got it and it was redacted. And they went through the hoops of requesting it again and then finally receiving the full Hottel memo without redactions. FOIA case 1555 167-000 that they filed on August 2022, and although the FBI denied their request for expedited processing, the release of the record came nonetheless, and they say within a week. So awesome. So we do have the unredacted version, and this goes back to my little note in the beginning that apparently they keep copies of unredacted stuff, and everything that we see redacted isn't like the final form of some of these documents. I think that's good to know. So this is to the director of the FBI, March 22nd, 1950. This was released in full in 2022, and the director of the FBI at that time would have been J. Edgar Hoover. So this was from a person named Guy Hottel, Hottel. He was in Washington, and he was an FBI agent, a special agent. All right, I'm not going to go into his bio, and I do have it somewhere, but I can't find it right now. It's neither here nor there. What's important is this memorandum. As I said, it's become known as the Hottel Memorandum. It is, just reading to you from top to bottom, this is Office Memorandum, United States Government, exactly what it says, to Director FBI, which was J. Edgar Hoover, from Guy Hottel, SAC, Washington, subject, flying saucers, information concerning. And I'm just going to read to you across the top of this. It says flying discs or flying saucers written in hand. And then we come to the typed information, which reads as follows. The following information was furnished to S.A.R.H. Kurtzman by Carl Howe, Special Investigator, Sex Squad, Metropolitan Police Department. And I think Sex Squad is something like, we would probably call that Vice nowadays, right? An investigator for the Air Forces stated that 3 so-called flying saucers had been recovered in New Mexico. They were described as being circular in shape with raised centers, approximately 50 feet in diameter. Each one was occupied by 3 bodies of human shape, but only 3 feet tall, dressed in metallic cloth of a very fine texture. Each body was bandaged in a manner similar to the blackout suits used by speed flyers and test pilots. According to Mr. Howe's informant, the saucers were found in New Mexico due to the fact that the government has a very high-powered radar setup in that area, and it is believed the radar interferes with the controlling mechanism of the saucers. No further evaluation was attempted by S.A. Kurtzman concerning the above, stamped, dated, the end. So that's a 1-page document, and it is shocking to read it, if I say so myself. This is dated March 22nd, 1950, just a short time, a year or two after the incident at Roswell. When was that, 47? So less than 3 years later. And it clearly states it out. It doesn't say like maybe. It's not from some citizen. It's not a report of someone saying, I saw a UFO. You guys know anything about it? No. This is from a special agent, a Washington correspondent for the FBI. He's sending it to the director of the FBI. So he's sending this as a memo. It's basically a letter to J. Edgar Hoover. And the subject is flying saucers, information concerning. And I just read the whole thing. It's not very long, but points of interest are, number one, so do we have enough authority already? I would say so. But the letter tells us an investigator for the Air Force stated that 3 flying saucers had been recovered in Mexico. So this is an investigator from the Air Force is the source, and the reporting person is an FBI agent, and he's sending this to J. Edgar Hoover. And it's right after, a couple years after Roswell. And the reason I say a couple years after Roswell, because this is also in New Mexico. So, and it's cool that it gives this theory that the government, it says, quote, the government has a very high-powered radar setup in that area, and it is believed that the radar interferes with the controlling mechanism of the saucers. And it doesn't say, like, of these saucers, or interfered with the controlling mechanism of this saucer. It says of the saucers, as if that's just, like, a plural phenomena. And not only that, this says that each of the, what was it? How many crashed there? 3 so-called flying saucers recovered in New Mexico. Black and white typeset right there. Described as being circular in shape with raised centers, approximately 50 feet in diameter, which that tracks with other, so-called sightings. And each one was occupied by 3 bodies of human shape, but only 3 feet tall, dressed in metallic cloth of very fine texture, and that they were wrapped up in the sort of pressure suits that like high-speed test pilots are in, as best they could describe it. That is phenomenal. It's amazing. And so This is one of those things. It's a glorious piece of UFO American history, as clear as can be. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, and I never had before this episode, and it's a really cool find among the FOIA requested documents that we all have as citizens, and we can check them out. So that's that. That's super cool. I probably should have saved that one for last. But anyway, we have a few more. Let's move on to the next one. As cool as that is, there's only so much you can say about a one-page document. If you want to read the whole thing, once again, I'll put it in the Dark Intel files on Patreon, and you can see it for free. The next document is called... Dun, dun, dun. I got to scroll up because I'm down in the weeds on this one. I left my talk at the bottom of it. All right. This is called the Grill Flame Program. This is part of a remote viewing session. Who conducted this? Classified Director, DIA. And this is, once again, approved for release by the CIA. It has the word secret stamped on it, but then that's crossed out. It's like the secret is secret. So there's 2 copies. This is hardly redacted at all. And it's a transcript from a remote viewing session. And it's funny because the people are number 14 and number 10.5. Right. Where's 11? This is the person that's like 11's roommate, 10.5. So I'm going to go through a little bit of this. It's crazy long. I'm not going to read it all to you, but this is where it starts out. This is a remote viewing session CC70. Let me see if I can find a date on here. Well, reviewed on January 2000. And I don't know if that's the release or the... Oh yeah, approved for release. So that's when it was released. I'm sure that the date is on here somewhere. I'm gonna look real quick at the bottom and see if it's on the bottom. No. So anyway, this would have been whenever they were doing project... It's long. I'm sorry. It's long. That's why I'm taking me a while to jump around here. It's not on this document, so I'm just going to open up a tab and look it up real quick. All right, Project Grill Flame was a U.S. Army initiative that began in the late 70s, part of a larger effort known as the Stargate Project, which focused on exploring the potential of psychic phenomenon, particularly remote viewing for military intelligence applications. So this would have been Project Grill Flame, which was part of the larger Stargate Project, all of that happening in the 1970s. So that's good enough as far as a date for us. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of it now that we were able to find that out. This report documents a remote viewing session conducted in compliance with a request from SODJ3OJCS, the Pentagon, Washington, D.C. The purpose of this session was to provide information relevant to the hostage situation in the U.S. Embassy compound in Tehran, Iran. So this would have been the hostage crisis of the 70s, apparently, and they tried to remote view that to get some intelligence. The remote viewers' impressions of the target area provided raw intelligence data, and as such have not been subjected to any intermediate analysis, evaluation, or collation. Interpretation and use of the information provided is the responsibility of the requestor. The protocol used for this session is detailed in the document Grill Flame Protocol. So that's how they do this. Following is a transcript of the viewer's impressions during the remote viewing session. And at tab A are drawings made by the remote viewer, reference his impressions of the target site, and tab B is target queuing information provided to the remote viewer. So number 14 says, this will be a remote viewing session. Pause. All right. The time is 9 o'clock. For the past few minutes, you, that's the remote viewer, have been looking at an overhead photo of the embassy compound in Iran. I want you to concentrate and focus on the area identified as Area J. When you feel that you are at Area J, describe your location and surroundings to me and let me know. So then, after a pause, it says, I'm at the corner of a building that's several stories high, brownstone type construction. I'm on a path that runs along a wall. The wall is to my left. A little door, an overhang, inset wooden door with several little glasses in it, a small, simple stoop, a small porch. It seems it's roughly in the middle of this wall. what's beyond the door? Number 14 asks. And number 10.5 says, going down the walk, it goes around and what I think is a low white wall. It comes away from the building. Number 14 says, I want you to go to the main entrance of this building. Go into the building and describe what you see. And number 10.5 says, a veranda porch with a front-facing wall. It has holes in it, and I can look out through from the porch. I feel like there are several round white pillars on this porch. Looks like it's cut into the building rather than projecting. Wrought iron or rattan. And then 14 says, I want you to get a good look around. Remember how it looks and how it's arranged so we can draw it later. Describe what you see inside the main building. And 10.5 says, he's still on the porch. For some reason, he says the stair is offset along the side entrance so that unless he goes way up, not until halfway, does he get the feeling that he's up the stairs. Behind him is a window. He says, I am at the top of the stairs. I'm at the top of the stairs. I'm down from the stairs a short distance, standing in a hall that looks like a hardwood floor. Okay, and it goes on like that. And then what happens is he finds a kitchen and he describes the kitchen. And then later on they determine that he was in a kitchen upstairs and that what they were looking for was a kitchen downstairs. And it seems that it was returned that all of this stuff was accurate. And I don't know to what degree this would help them. There's some weird things. There's like he finally does get in there, and so number 14, that would be the interviewer or the conductor or the handler, whatever they call him, says, before the session, I want you to scope out the building one more time and pick up on any occupants of the building. And when you feel like you're satisfied the requirement on that, then we'll end the session. And number 10.5 says, I have one non-friendly in the living room, appears to be standing in the middle of the floor, appears to have a weapon over his right shoulder, talking to another individual who is seated in a chair along the wall under the stair side. I'm still getting imagery of a man sitting at the table reading, and it still has the feeling that there's an upstairs area. Then number 14 says, I want you to take a good look at the man who's upstairs in the reading area. I want you to try to identify him. And this is crazy. 10.5 says, I think it's the guy with the beard. Far away. He's the guy that popped into my head. I started to look at him. Okay, he looks like Abraham Lincoln. And then 14 says, you got it all? And then 10.5 says, yeah. And then it's kind of fades out. And he describes like leaving the building. So crazy. Now, we don't have any way to know how accurate this was, although it seems like they wrap it up and he's like, okay, good, thanks. I don't know. They have him mentally label stuff, which is very weird, like labeling these thoughts as you move around them in your head in these sort of astral projection sessions. That's very Monarch programming, MK Ultra vibes. And then they just sort of talk it out at the end. They realize he was in the wrong kitchen for whatever reason. And so they know enough about where he's looking. And it's not that they don't know there's a kitchen upstairs and downstairs. What they're looking for, it seems like, is who are the people in there. And it seems like this person did it. It's phenomenal. Now, we all know that this remote viewing program, the men who stare at goats, like all that sort of pop culture smokescreen that gets thrown at this a lot of times. And the official story is, we did it for 20 years and it just really didn't work. But when you go through these documents, that's not the feeling that you get. It feels like this was a matter of routine. They have a very methodical approach to it. It's all outlined. They tell you what they're going to do, and then they're off to the races and describing people in a room. It's crazy. Crazy. So anyway, that's the document that's called Grill Flame Program Session Report, made public by a FOIA request in 2000, and a document from the 70s. A cool one, for sure. Long. You can go through it. There's some, and much like the other sort of paranormal study from Stanford, in this document, there's a bunch of drawings at the end that they're cool. They look like what you might expect. It's not Rembrandt, okay, but it's like blueprints, and one of them is a second floor kitchen with here's the sinks, here's the counter, here's the refrigerator, here's the man seated at a table, here's the door, like a pretty good diagram. It would be cool if we could have like the blueprints of the real building and see how close he got to being correct. But just the fact that they did this is fascinating. And what seems to be taken at face value as accurate by the people doing it. So, amazing. So the next one that we come to is another sort of remote viewing thing. It's pretty cool. This is called Mars Exploration. This was dated May 22nd, 1984. And once again, this is a remote viewing project that was cataloged and recorded. And this is also from the CIA, a PDF. We have the whole thing. It's unredacted. So I'm going to go through the top of this. It's a little different. It's kind of cool. So what they did here, method of site acquisition, sealed envelope coupled with geographic coordinates. So that was the target. They had the I guess, coordinates of an area on Mars that they wanted a remote viewer to check out, and it was in an envelope. The sealed envelope was given to the subject immediately prior to the envelope, was not opened until after the interview. In the envelope was a 3x5 card with the following information. Quote, the planet Mars, time of interest approximately 1 million years BC. So that's what was on an index card inside an envelope that was sealed that they gave to him and said, this is your target. And then he goes off to the races to do his remote viewing, and he doesn't open the envelope until after that. Okay. So we're going to go through a little bit of this, and you're going to see how crazy it gets. So right off the bat, the time is given, the date, May 22nd, 10 a.m., 10:09 a.m. to be specific, and plus 10 minutes, ready to start. Okay. Using the information in the envelope I provided, exclusively focusing your attention now. Using the information in the envelope, focus on 40.89 degrees north, 9.55 degrees west. And this would be a location on Mars. But the guy doesn't know that because he just knows what he has in the envelope. I guess psychically he does. That's sort of the point. And then the subject says, I want to say it looks like an oblique view, a pyramid, some kind of pyramid form. It's very high, kind of sitting in a large depressed area. It's yellowish, ochre colored. That sounds like Mars, right? And so the director says, move in time to the time indicated in the envelope I've provided you and describe what's happening. And the subject says, I'm tracking severe clouds, more like dust storm. It's a geologic problem. It seems to be, and he says, just a minute, I've got to iron this out. It's really weird. And the director says, just report your raw perceptions at this time. You're still early in the session. And the subject says, I'm looking at it, after effects of a major geologic problem. And the director says, okay, go back in time before the geologic problem. And the subject says, total difference. It's before. There's, I don't know, oh hell. It's like mountains of dirt. They appear then disappear when you go before. Large flat surfaces, very smooth. Angles, walls, they're really large. I mean, megalithic. And the director says, all right, at this period in time now, before the geologic activity, look around, in and around this area, and see if you can find any activity. And the subject says, I'm seeing, it's like a perception of a shadow of people, very tall, thin. It's only a shadow. It's as if they were there and they're not there anymore. And the director says, go back to a period where they are there. And the subject says, it's like I get a lot of static on a line and everything. It's breaking up all the time. It's very fragmenty pieces. The director says, just report the raw data. Don't try to put things together. Just report the raw data. And the subject says, I just keep seeing very large people. They appear thin and tall, but they're very large, wearing some kind of strange clothes. And then the director says, all right, now holding in this time period, I want to move from your physical location in space to another location, but in this same time period, move now to 46.45 north, 353.22 east. Move this time to, and then he repeats that. And the subject says, deep inside of a cavern, not a cavern, more like a canyon, I'm looking up the sides of a steep wall that seem to go on forever. And there's like a structure with it's like the wall of the canyon itself has been carved. Again, I'm getting a very large structure. In no intricacies, huge sections of smooth stone. And the director says, do the structures have insides and outsides? And the subject says, yes. They're very, it's like a rabbit warren. Corners of rooms, they're really huge. I don't feel like I'm standing in one. It's just really huge. Perception is that the ceiling is very high. Walls very wide. And then the director says, yes, that would be correct. All right, I'd like to move now to another location nearby. And he gives him another set of coordinates. And the subject says, appears to be the end of a very large road. And there's a marker thing that's very large. Keep getting Washington Monument overlay. It's like an obelisk. And the director says, okay, from this point, move to, and he gives him more coordinates. And the subject says, it's like I'm in the middle of a huge circular basin of the range mountains by almost all the way around, very ragged mountains, very tall, basins, very, very, very large. Scale seems to be off or something. It's just really big. Everything's big. And the director says, I understand the problem. Just continue. And it sort of goes on, and they do this a few times, but it's crazy that like the director will say, yep, that's right, when he describes like these places, and this is on Mars. And this is 1982 or something. When was it? 84. Anyway, it's phenomenal. And it goes on, and he describes these big geological places and, you know, different chambers, no furnishings, strictly functional place. Hibernation, he says, some form of very raw input, storms, savage storms, and sleeping there for shelter. And he says, the director says, tell me about the ones who sleep through the storms. And the subject says, very tall, again, very large. They're people, but they're thin. They look thin because of their height, and they dress like in, oh hell, it's like a real light silk, but it's not flowing, not a flowing type of clothing. It's like cut to fit. They're ancient people. They're dying. It's past their time or age. They're very philosophic about it. They're looking for a way to survive, and they just can't seem to get their way out. They can't seem to find their way out. So they're hanging on while they look or wait for something to return or something coming with an answer. And the director says, what is it they're waiting for? And the subject says, evidently a group or a party of them that went to find a new place to live. It's like I'm getting all kinds of overwhelming input of the corruption of their environment. It's failing very rapidly, and this group went somewhere, like a long way, to find another place to live. And the director says, what was the cause of the atmospheric disturbance or the environment disturbance? And the subject says, I see a picture of like, oh hell, it's almost a warp in, oh God, this is difficult. It's like going, and the director says, just the raw data. And the subject says, I get a globe. It's like a globe that goes through a comet's tail, or it's through a river of something, but it's all very cosmic. It's like space pictures. And the director says, before you leave this individual, ask him if there is any way that ask him if he knows who you are, and is there any way you can help him in his present predicament? And the subject says, all I get is that they must just wait. He doesn't know who I am. He thinks he perceives I'm a hallucination or something. The director says, okay, when the others left, these people are waiting. When the others left, how did they go? And the subject says, get an impression of, I don't know what the hell it is. It looks like the inside of a larger boat, very rounded walls and shiny metal. And the director says, go along with them on their journey and find out where it is they go. And the subject says, impression of a really crazy place with volcanoes and gas pockets and strange plants. Very volatile place. It's very much like going from the frying pan into the fire. Difference is there seems to be a lot of vegetation where the other place did not have it. A kind of storm. And then the director says, all right, it's time to come back now to the sound of my voice, into the present time, to right now, the 22nd of May, 1984, the sound of my voice. Move back to the room, back to the sound of my voice, back further now to the sound of my voice. On the 22nd of May, 1984, end of interview. And that is better than fiction. It is phenomenal. And it seems like this remote viewer remote viewed Mars. What was it? Like way back, 1,000,000 years BC, when Mars was pyramids and dust and the last survivors there. And he rode on their ship and went somewhere with volcanic activity and vegetation. And where else in the universe do we know where that is but here? Freaking cool, man. That is cool. And that's CIA FOIA documents. Not like some kid on the internet wrote that. That's crazy cool. So the last thing is, where would this be from? This is an Air Force Research Laboratory report. Air Force Material Command, Edwards Air Force Base. And the report is called Teleportation Physics Study. Teleportation Physics Study. It is incredibly long. It's 89 pages long. It was created by a company called Warp Drive Metrics in San Rafael, Las Vegas, Nevada. And it's sponsored by the Air Force Research Laboratory at Edwards Air Force Base. And it was approved for public distribution. And here, I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's crazy, but here's the abstract. This study was tasked with the purpose of collecting information describing the teleportation of material objects, providing a description of teleportation as it occurs in physics, its theoretical and experimental status, and a projection of potential applications. The study also consisted of a search for teleportation phenomena occurring naturally or under laboratory conditions that can be assembled into a model describing the conditions required to accomplish the transfer of objects. This included a review and documentation of quantum teleportation, its theoretical basis, technological development, and its potential applications. The characteristics of teleportation were defined, and physical theories were evaluated in terms of their ability to completely describe the phenomena. Contemporary physics, as well as theories that presently challenge the current physics paradigm, were investigated. The author identified and proposed two unique physics models for teleportation that are based on the manipulation of either the general relativistic spacetime metric or the spacetime vacuum electromagnetic called zero-point fluctuation parameters, naturally occurring anomalous teleportation phenomena that were previously studied by the United States and foreign governments were also documented in the study and are reviewed in the report. The author proposes an additional model for teleportation that is based on a combination of the experimental results from the previous government studies and advanced physics concepts. Numerous recommendations outlining proposals for further theoretical and experimental studies are given in the report. The report also includes an extensive teleportation bibliography. So there you have it. The subject terms are teleportation, physics, quantum teleportation, teleportation phenomena, and then a bunch more that I'm not going to read. So rock on. This is crazy, right? This is the special technical report presented the results of a subcontracted study performed by Warp Drive Metrics, Las Vegas, Nevada, for the Air Force Research Laboratory. The project manager was Dr. Franklin B. Meade, Jr. The report has been reviewed and approved for release and distribution in accordance with the distribution statement on the cover. This report is published in the interest of scientific and technical information exchange and does not constitute approval or disapproval of its ideas and findings. And you can read this in the Dark Intel files on Patreon, and I am not going to go too deep into a lot of it. It's crazy technical. The point is, it exists, and it has sections where it defines a million acronyms: AEC, Average Energy Condition; AFRL, Air Force Research Lab; AU, Astronomical Unit; CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, and 100 more. It has a big acknowledgement section and a preface. And it says the teleportation physics study is divided into 4 phases. Phase 1 is a review and documentation of quantum teleportation, its theoretical basis, technological development, and potential application. Phase 2, textbook description of teleportation as it occurs in classical physics, explored theoretical and experimental status, and projected its potential applications. Phase 3, a search for phenomena occurring naturally. And Phase 4 is the final report. So here we have an extensive study into the concept of teleportation. It says it was originally developed during the golden age of the 20th century science fiction literature, and that modern hardcore sci-fi literature, with the exception of some franchises, have abandoned using the concept because writers believe it has more to do with the realms of parapsychology and paranormal or psychic and imaginative fantasy than the realm of science. But beginning in the 80s, development in quantum theory and general relativity physics have succeeded in pushing the envelope in exploring the reality of teleportation. And then there's definitions. There's the psychic and the physical differentiations. Engineering the vacuum or space-time metric, conveyance of a person or inanimate object across space by altering the properties of the space-time vacuum or by altering the space-time metric geometry, and that we will call this VM teleportation, and a bunch of other definitions, and then there's studies. And beyond that, man, it gets into some serious math. But there are diagrams of simultaneous view of 2 remote compact regions. These are what's called the Minkowski space, used to create the wormhole, where time is suppressed. It's heavy duty, man. This falls into that category of, you might be driving and I don't want to put you to sleep, so we're not going to go through all of it. The math is here. You can back it up and you can go through it. And there's actually like equations from Einstein are in here. It's just heavy stuff. Engineering the vacuum. We went into the energy of the vacuum in the Nassim Haramein episode. Go back and check that one out. That was really fun. One of the most replayed. The Kashmir effect. I'm going to scroll to the very bottom of this dense information, and we already sort of talked about the methodology, but okay. So this is just going to wrap this document up. This comes from the recommendation section at the end. Near the end, there are numerous supporters within the U.S. military establishment who comprehend the significance of remote viewing and psychic phenomena and believe that they could have strategic implications. Marine War College studied the remote viewing program, interviewed many of the former participants. Bremseth wrote his thesis on the topic and concluded that the evidence supported continuing research and applications of remote viewing. A research program involving on and expanding implemented variations of experiments should be conducted in order to generate teleportation phenomenon first in the lab, the performances and characteristics of teleportation need to be delineated in order to develop a refined hypothesis. Such a program should be designed so that an operational model for teleportation can be developed and implemented as a prototype. An experimental program similar in fashion to the remote viewing program should be funded at $900,000 to $1 million a year, in parallel with a theoretical program funded at $500,000 a year for initial 5-year duration. And this is in the 80s, so just quadruple that. The role of quantum physics theory and related phenomena should be explored in this program. An experiment definition should study the conducted first to identify and propose the best experiments for this program. And then that's that. So biological quantum teleportation recommendation. So they're saying, let's go. And this was in 1982. Is that right? I might be mixing up my documents here. No, this is newer. This is 2003. So anyway, my point is, if they thought that then, what have they done since? You know, okay, 2003 and the official report 2004. So a number of years ago at this point, all I'm saying is, if that was their conclusion in 2004, they were like, giddy up, teleportation, let's do it. So what is it? What are the FOIA requests that they're going to let us see in another 10 years going to reveal? A lot of weird stuff going on in the world. Mandela effects, time seems like glitching out, and like things that people remember, and I mean millions of people, and we're going to get into that one of these days. But the point is, it seems like they've kind of opened up some envelopes, and we're just glimpsing them when we look at some of these studies. So real quick, tap follow wherever you're listening so you can stay connected and help the show grow. And if you like what I do for you here, you can find everything about Renegade Files at therenegadefiles.com. That's the only place you need to go to find everything else. Check it out. You can rock the merch from there. You can support us on Patreon. You can get bonus episodes. I have an archive of every episode. I have a free player. I have everything you need to learn and to love Renegade Files at therenegadefiles.com. I appreciate everyone who's an RFA agent on Patreon. It's the only way that we make money right now. So if you can do that, you can help us for a little while. You don't have to stay forever. If you've thought about joining the RFA agency before, or you said, man, someday when I get a job, I'll do it, and you've been working for a couple years now, jump in there and help a brother create. You don't have to stay forever. There's no contract. You can pick the lowest tier and just kick a few bucks across the internet, and I would really appreciate it. It helps me do this. And thanks again to the people who already do. You mean so much to me. And give me a shout there. Give me a comment on an Instagram post. Let me know where you are and what you're thinking, or if you have a cool idea for a show. So that's going to wrap up this crazy episode, which was The Real X-Files, paranormal documents from the CIA and FBI. Some cool stuff in there, right? That was fun. I hope you liked it, and I hope you had fun doing it. And like I said, there's hundreds of thousands of them. Maybe I'll make a bonus episode for the patrons, or maybe we'll revisit this in a couple months and dig through some more. We never know where we're going to go, but we're always on the lookout for cool stuff. So thank you so much for being a part of the Renegade Files crew. And thank you for investigating the Real X-Files with me today. Until our next adventure, I'm your host, Lex Gordon. Stay wild, pirate radio child.